Okay, so we're looking at 5.1. We're looking at question number 1. So what we've got is we've got a question that has 4 terms. Okay, so when we have 4 terms, we need to factor it by grouping. Now, in some cases, you may have to rewrite them in a different order. Most of the time, though, you're not going to have to do that. When we factor by grouping, we group usually the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So when I look at the first 2 terms, okay, these have a 3 in common, so that's okay. And these have an s squared in common. So that means we can try to factor it by grouping, and we're not going to have to rearrange. If nothing came out, if this would have been like a 5 and a minus 3s, we would probably have to look at rearranging them because they would have nothing in common. But in this case, they do have a 3 in common. So we're going to factor out a 3. Now, whenever a number is completely gone, like this 3 here, we leave a 1. That 1 is kind of like a placeholder. So 3 divided by 3, it's not gone, we leave a 1 there. And then we have a minus. Okay, minus comes down, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and we just leave the s. We don't put the 1 in front of the s, but we know that it's there. Now, when we look at the second grouping, we need to make sure that it looks at the end like this one. So when we look here, we look at these s's. Okay, they both have s's in common. Now, what do we always factor out with these? We always factor out the highest power, and the lowest power. So what's the lowest power here? S squared. So we're going to take out an s squared. We always take out the lowest power, and that leaves you with the 1 minus s. Okay. And then what do we have in common now? Well, these have the same parentheses, don't they? Right? They have to be the same. If these are not the same, then you automatically know that you made a mistake. So we'll go ahead and factor that out, and that's going to leave you with a 1 minus s. And then that leaves you then with, these are gone, a 3 plus s squared. Now, how do we know that we are done, that we can stop here? A lot of times, students get confused and aren't really sure when to stop. How do we know this is our final answer? Well, first off, we look and we see. Okay, is there anything in common in our first set of parentheses that can come out? Nope. Is there anything in common in our second set of parentheses that can come out? Nope. So therefore, we know that we are now finished. And that's as far as we could go.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
may I add 3 and 4?
Sure. Yep. We can add 3 and 4 to the list. And that's in 5.1?
Yes, and then 9 and 14.
Sure. 9 and 14 out of 5.2, right?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Sorry.
Hey,
Kate
you're
will be
welcome.
here soon.
Okay. Yep. No problem. Okay. So we'll add question 3 next. So in question 3, we want to take out the greatest common factor. Okay, so when we look at this one, now, what do these have in common? Well, they both have a what? Okay, they both have an x minus 4. And what else do they have in common? Let's make sure we wrote it all correctly. They also have what in common? X plus 5. Now, if it's gone, what do we leave? We leave a 1. Just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to leave a set of parentheses, I'm going to use square brackets so we don't have so many parentheses. Now, what did we take out of the first 2 pieces? Okay, the first piece here, we took out an x minus 4. We took out an x plus 5. So all of this divides by that, and that leaves you with a what? 1, right? Because it's gone. goes away completely. We leave a 1. And what about over here? Same thing. We leave a 1. And then that 1 plus 1 makes it a 2. We'll put that out in front. There's another way to look at this question also. At the very, very beginning, what could you have done? You could have looked at these and said, well, these are exactly the same, right? So this whole grouping and this whole grouping are the same. And how many of them do you have total? 2. Okay, if you think about this is like an x, and this is like another x, if you add them together, what do you get? 2x, right? These are the same, so you can actually put them together and make this as a 2 times the x minus 4, x plus 5. You can also look at it as factoring. Okay, these have an x minus 4 in common, also an x plus 1, x plus 5 in common. And when you take it out completely, what does that leave you with? That leaves you with a 1 on that one, another 1 over here, 1 and 1 add together to give you the 2. So there's different ways of looking at it. You can see that these are the same and they can go together, or you can factor it out. Question 4. Now, on question 4, we need to see if this is factored. How do we know if something has been factored? Well, if it's been factored, nothing else will come out of it. Nothing's in common. They cannot be put together. And this one has already been factored. How do I know that this one has already been factored? Okay, well, first thing I do is I look at these. Are these the same? No. Okay? Now, we have a 6 and a 7, x and a y. Can anything come out of this first set of parentheses? Nope. Can anything come out of the second set here? Nope. Nothing comes out at all. Everything is already in parentheses, so this has already been factored. So yes, it has been factored. So that one has already been factored. And the reason why it's already been factored is nothing else comes out and nothing can be done with it. Question 7. We've got 2x cubed plus 8x. And the directions here are take out the greatest common factor. So the first thing we look at when we look at these is how many terms do I have? Okay, I've got 2 terms, right? Terms are separated by addition or subtraction. And then when I look at the terms, this one has a 2, and this one has an 8. So they have a number in common. Looks like they have a 2 in common, don't they? Okay, so that 2 will come out. And they also have an x in common. We always take out our smallest power. This one's cubed, and this one's just an x. So what are we going to take out? We're going to take out simply an x, right? So 2x comes out. Is everyone okay with how I did that? Always take out the lowest power, and then you see what number's in common, if they have one. Now we start dividing, and what do we do with our exponents? They subtract. So 2 divided by 2, that's a 1. X cubed, we're going to take 1 out, so that leaves you then with a 1x squared. We don't have to put the 1 there, so we just bring down the x squared. What about the next piece? 8 divided by 2, that's a 4. The x comes out. So what's our final finished answer? 2x out in front. And what's inside of our parentheses? X squared plus 4. And that's as far as you can go. Question 8 is another factor by grouping. So what we've got on question 8 is we've got t squared plus 9t plus 5t plus 45. Now, how do I know if it didn't tell me that this would be factor by grouping? Well, to do factor by grouping, you've got to have 4 terms. Okay? The number of terms tells us how we factor these. If you have 4 terms, you factor by grouping. If you have 3 terms, you're going to split up the middle. Okay, that's a trinomial. If you have 2 terms, we're going to learn about how to do that today, which is using a special formula. This one has 4 terms, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's factor by grouping. First thing I look at is, can any number or any variable come out of all the pieces? Well, nope, that one doesn't have a t, so no t can come out, and this one doesn't have any number to go along with the 9 or the 5. So nothing can come out at the very beginning. Always, always check that first. If a number or a variable comes out, you've got to factor it out at the beginning. Nothing comes out. These do have something in common, because a t squared and a 9t, what do they have in common? T. So the t will come out. T squared, take out a t, that leaves you with a t. That t is gone, so that's going to be a t plus 9, right? Okay, now, what do we need to make sure happens? Well, we need to make sure when we look at the next 2 pieces here, that we end up with the t plus 9 in parentheses. That's very, very important. So what does 5 and 45 have in common? They have a 5 in common. And if I take out that 5 or factor it out, that leaves me then with the t. That matches. And what's 45 divided by 5? That's a 9. Right? That matches as well. Now, are my groupings identical here? Yep. And if they're not identical, if these parentheses are different, you made a mistake. So those are the same. So I write it out in front with the t plus 9, gone and gone. What's left over? Well, what's left over is t plus 5, and that's as far as I can go. We got one more, and we can add more to the list if we need to. But let's look at 18, and then we need to add some more out of 5 when we can do that. So for 18, we've got t, and a 5 minus m, and an s, and 5 minus m. A lot of times when we look at a question like this, we just need to kind of see where to begin. Okay, so we know we've got to factor out a greatest common factor. And when I look here, do I see something in common? Yeah, okay. Are these parentheses exactly the same? Yeah, they look exactly the same, don't they? Right? So those are the same. So that means then that 5 minus m can come out. That's gone, and that's gone. What's left over then? T plus s, and that is your final factored, finished answer. A lot of times I think students struggle with when to stop, and they think that these problems should be more complicated. Some of them are a lot more difficult than others. Some of these are just saying, okay, those are the same, factor it out. What's left over? Write it down. That's it. How do we know we're going to stop here? 5 and an m, nothing in common. T and an s, nothing in common. Did we have any more to look at out of 5, 1?
Can we actually do 6,
Sure, yep, we can look at 6 as well.
9, and 14?
Okay, 6, 9, and 14. Let me add them to the list here.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. 6, 9, and 14. Okay, so let's go back and look at question 6. Okay, question 6 is very, very similar to what we just did for 18. So for question 6, we've got 4x and a 5x plus 3 minus 5 times 5x plus 3. So we want to take out the greatest common factor, and we look for things that they have in common. Now, it could be a number, could be a variable, or it could be a set of parentheses. So in this case, these parentheses are identical, aren't they? Right? Okay. So those parentheses are identical. So that means it's going to come out as a 5x plus 3. Gone then, and gone. Okay, what's left over? 4x minus 5. It didn't get crossed off, and that's your final answer. How do I know I'm done? 5 and 3, nothing in common. 4 and 5, nothing in common. That's it. Question 9. Factor by grouping. WY plus Y plus W plus 1. Okay. Now, we could rearrange the order if we wanted to, but I don't think we're going to need to. So when I look at this, I've got my 4 terms. So that tells me it's a factor by grouping. And we kind of want to look ahead a bit and think in our minds what's going to happen when we start factoring. Well, if I were to look at the first 2 pieces, what can come out of here? First 2 pieces, they have something in common. What can come out? A y. And that's going to leave you with a w plus y divided by y. Remember, that leaves you with a 1. Always remember, 2 terms to begin with, 2 terms inside the parentheses. 2 at the beginning ends with 2. Okay, very, very important. Whenever you factor, the number of terms stays the same. Now, what do we know already here? On the next 2 pieces, these have nothing in common, but what do you notice? This is already the same as that. Okay, right? They are identical. Now, in some cases, if nothing comes out, you can always take out a 1 as a placeholder. So if nothing comes out, you can take out a 1. And that's going to leave you with a w plus 1. And now, as you can see, they both have w plus 1s in common. Right? So that w plus 1 can come out in front. And then what's left over? Y plus 1, isn't it? Okay. Is everyone okay with how I did that?
Yeah, this seems so simple now.
Yeah, a lot of them, and it is. Sometimes when you first see factoring,
You have a heart attack?
well, you have to think about looking and working things backwards because you're not multiplying, you're factoring it out. So it's kind of like dividing in a way. It's not difficult. You just have to think about, okay, what can I do? And how do I approach these problems? And a lot of times students just really struggle with, where do I begin? What do I do with this problem? And sometimes you think it's easier, harder than what it should be. And you think, okay, I just did that, but is there more to do? No, there's really not. Okay, some of these are very involved. Most of them, though, are not. And one more, we'll add 14. We added 14 to the list also. And 14 is a yes or no question. Has this been factored? Now, how do we know if something has been factored? Factored just means we're done. We're finished with it. There's nothing else that can be done. So we know that we cannot go any further on this one, and that this one has been factored, because when we look at it, we look at each set of parentheses. Okay, a 4 and a 5. Do they have anything in common here? Nope. 8 and a 1. Do they have anything in common? No. Now you cannot put that 8 and that 4 together. They're separate parentheses. Okay, they have to be in the same set of parentheses to come out. Nothing in common in the first set of parentheses. Nothing in common in the second set. So this has already been factored. So yes, it has been factored. Okay, so that one's already been factored. Any others out of that 5-1 to look at? We've got a couple of questions out of 5-2, and then we're going to look at more of them.
Were we able to do all of 5-2?
We should have been able to do all of them except for 10
Okay, good.
and I think 20. Yep, 10 and 20 are the ones that we haven't done yet. And we're going to go over one like 10 and 20 later today. And we're also going to review more of these because factoring trinomials is very, very important. So let's look at question number 1. So we've got 42, and this is out of 5-2, by the way. So this is 42 m squared plus 61 mn plus 14 n squared. Okay, so first thing we want to look at is we need to see if we can factor something out. I've got a 42, and I've got a 14 and a 61. Now, I know I can't take a 2 out because 42 and 14 are even, but 61 is odd. So the only thing I can take out of 14 is 14 has a 7 and a 2 in it. And let's see if 7 goes into all of them. Okay, 61, does that evenly divide by 7? Nope, it does not, right? So 61 does not go into 7, so that's not going to come out. What about 2? We know it's an odd number, so 2 won't go in there. So the first thing I did was I looked at my numbers. These are pretty large numbers. A lot of times a number or a variable will come out. In this case, nothing will though. Okay, so we double check to make sure that nothing would come out. What's our next step? Well, our next step, how many terms do we have? 3. Okay, so what do we do when we have 3 terms? We're going to take the first times the last, and we're going to try and split that middle up. So, 3 terms, first times the last, and split the middle. Well, 42 times 14. And the number will be pretty large, but that's okay. That's 588. So we put that over here. Now, what do we know about that 588? Okay, 588 is positive. That 588 is positive, so that means they are either both positive or both negative. So that's the first thing we do, is we look at our signs and we try to figure out what it's going to be. 588 was positive, so they're either both positive or both negative. Now we look in the sign in the middle. Okay, what's our sign in the middle? Positive. So that means these are both going to be positives. Now, where do we begin? Well, 588 is an even number. So there's going to be a multiple of 2 in there somewhere. 2 is probably not going to work. We can start with 2, but 2 won't work. Okay, 2 and 294. Way larger than that 61. Let's try 4. Okay, getting closer, right? Every time we go up, it's going to get closer to that 61. How about a 6? 6 and 98, right? Add them together. We're getting closer to 61. How about 8? 8 doesn't go in there. 10's not because it doesn't end in a 0. How about 12? 12 and 49. Well, what does that give you? 12 plus 49, that gives you what? 61. Okay, so what are my two numbers? 12 and 49. We always write the larger number first. The most difficult part of these problems is finding the two numbers. Now, how did I know where to begin and what to do? I looked at the fact that it was even, and I said, okay, this is an even number, so there has to be some multiple of 2 in it. Now, we could have just jumped straight to 12 because you could have looked at it and said, well, 2 is not obviously going to work. 4 is not going to work. But if you can't see the number, you start with the multiple of 2 and just keep going until you find it. You're eventually going to find it. Use your calculator. You will eventually come up with the numbers that will work. Now, let's double check and make sure they work. So, to make it work, 49 times 12, what does that give you? 588, which it does. That's what we want. That's what's in here. What else can we check? 49 plus 12, what is that? 61. That's what we have in the middle. Now what do we do next? We split up that 61. So the first term and the last term always stay the same. The only part that gets split is the middle. So we're going to take that 61 and we're going to split that into 49. Now the variable that's associated with the middle is an mn. So 49 mn and a 12 mn. And then add on your 14 n squared. So we split that middle up. Now what do we do? Well, now we have made a factor by grouping problem. Because now we have 4 terms. And we can group these together. Let's group the first 2 together. When I look at the first 2, we should kind of see what's going to be in common. 49 is a perfect square of 7. So the only thing that's in 49 is a 7. Is 7 in the 42? Yep, it is. So we're going to take out a 7. And what else do they have in common? Okay, they have an m. So a 7m comes out. And 42 divided by 7, of course, that's going to be a what? 6. We have an m squared. Take 1 out. That leaves you with an m. 49 divided by 7. You can use a calculator if you want to. Of course, we know that's going to be 7. The m comes out, but the n is left over. Now, let me show you an easy way to get the next 2 pieces. When I look at the next 2 pieces, I know that the first piece had better be a 6m. So what do we know about the 12? Okay, well, 12 divided by 6 is what? 12 divided by 6 is a 2. So I automatically know that I've got to factor at a 2. Why? Because we need to make sure that we have a 6 when we write it over here. So we're going to factor at a 2. And what else do they have in common? N. Now it should match up. Okay. So now when we divide them, let's see what we have. 12 divided by 2. 12 divided by 2. That leaves you with a 6. N's are gone. So 6m. See how they match? If they don't match, you made a mistake. 14. 14 divided by 2 is a 7. Matches. N squared. Take out an n. That leaves you with a 7n. Now what do we know? Now we know that these are the same. Okay. So that's going to come out in front. And that leaves you with the 6m plus 7. Gone and gone. And what's left over? 7m plus 2n. So these are basically the same as what you did in 5.1. We're just adding an extra step on top of it. Because we take the 3 terms and actually turn it into 4 so that we can factor it. question 4, we're going to have to factor something out to begin with. Okay, so on this one, we're going to have to factor something out to begin with. And I already know that an x is going to have to come out, right? Because these all have an x in common. Now, one thing we also need to do is if it ever starts with a negative, if your first term is a negative, you've got to factor out a negative because you want it to be positive. Otherwise, it makes it more difficult. So it begins with a negative, so I got to factor out a negative. And what else? Well, 2, 8, and 64, these are all even numbers, so a 2 can come out. So we're going to take out a negative 2. And we also said that these have an x in common. So what we're going to factor out at the very, very beginning, because it's in common, because that's your greatest common factor, is a minus 2x. The negative is coming out because this is out at the very beginning. So now when we factor out that negative, what's going to happen? We're going to have to switch our signs. Okay? Negative 2 divided by negative 2. Negative and negative makes it positive. X cubed, take out an x, that leaves you with a positive x squared. Next one, negative 8 divided by negative 2. Negative and negative makes it a positive. And x squared, take out an x, positive 4 there. Next, 64. 64 divided by negative 2, that's a negative. And 64 divided by 2, that's a 32. So now we've gotten to this step. Now we need to factor this trinomial. It has 3 terms. No numbers in front, so we put a 1 here. And then we take our 1 times our negative 32. We don't worry about that negative 2x out in front because all that does is just stay along with it. Okay, that just drops down to the very end. So this negative 2x here, we don't even worry about it. It's out in front. It's been factored out. All that does is drop down at the very end. So now we take the 1 times a negative 32, and that makes it a negative 32 in the box. Well, this is positive, or sorry, it is negative. Let me say that correctly. It is negative. Since the sign in the box is negative, I know that one of them is positive, one of them is negative. Then we look at the sign in the middle. The sign in the middle tells you what they're going to be. Okay, the sign in the middle says it's positive. So that means the larger number is positive, smaller number is negative. Right? Because it's positive in the middle. If it would have been a negative 4, then we would know the larger number would be negative, smaller number would be positive. Now we start working with this. Okay, we've got 32. We could try 2, but let's try 4. We'll start with the little larger number here. How about 4? Okay, 4 and 8. And that was easy, right? Because 4 and 8, when we take 8 minus 4, what do we get? 4. That's what we want. So we're going to use an 8 and a 4. And you could have started with 2 and then moved on to 4 after that. But I just saw, okay, it's a pretty big number. Let's start with 4 instead of 2. Now what do? Now we take that 4x and we split it up. And we rewrite that as x squared. And we have an 8x. And then we have a minus 4x. And then a minus 32. Don't even worry about that minus 2x out front. That's just going to drop down at the end. Okay, so it's gone. Don't even worry about it. You can pretend like it's not even there until the very, very end. Now we factor by grouping. First 2 pieces. Well, looks like they have an x in common. And that's going to leave you with an x plus 8. Next 2 pieces, well, it begins with a negative. Right? So you always have to factor in a negative if it begins with a negative. And we need to come up with an x. So this 4 needs to come out. So we're going to factor in a minus 4. And that's going to then leave you with, watch your signs here. When you factor out negative 4 divided by negative 4 makes it positive x at the end. And a negative 32 divided by a negative 4. Those signs switch because negative divided by negative makes it a positive. So that's a positive 8 there. Almost done. Are my groupings the same? Yes, they are. So that's going to come out as an x plus 8. Gone and gone. What's left over? X minus 4. And do not forget that still out in front of all of it is your what? Minus 2x. Factoring these, it's just basically a puzzle. You're just finding out what pieces go together and how they link up. That's all you're doing. It's just a puzzle. And sometimes you do have to come up with creative ways of looking at them and thinking about them, but they're all just a puzzle. Question 9. Okay, so question 9, we have x squared plus 2xy minus 35y squared. So first things first, nothing's in common, right? Always check that first. No number, no variables in common. If there's nothing in front, we add a 1. And we take 1 times that negative 35. So that makes it a negative 35 in the box. Well, we know that's negative. So that means one of the numbers is positive, one of the numbers is negative. We look in the middle, and the sign in the middle, in this case, is positive. So larger one's positive, smaller one's negative. I always write the larger one first. That way we don't get mixed up with the signs. We know the larger number needs to be positive. Okay, well, what do we know about 35? 35 ends in a 5, right? Now, if it ends in a 0 or a 5, you're going to start off with multiples of 5. For 5s, if it ends in a 0, you're going to try 5s and 10s. So this ends in a 5. Okay, so 35 ends in a 5. So let's try 5. Well, 35, divide that by 5, what do we get? 7. Okay, and what do we know about 7 and 5? Well, 7 minus 5, what does that give you? 2. That's what we want. So what are my two numbers here going to be? Positive 7, negative 5. And if you forget, you can always check, because 7 times a negative 5, right, is a negative 35. And 7 minus 5 is a 2, which is there. You don't have to check them every time like I did here, but you can. Split it up, and that's going to be x squared. We split that 2 up into 7xy, and a minus 5xy, and then a minus 35y squared. Is everyone okay with what we've got so far? Everyone all right with that so far? Split that middle up. So you always, with 3 terms, you try to make it then 4 and try to factor it by grouping. Well, see what we can factor out of here. Looks like first 2 pieces. Looks like an x comes out, and that leaves you with an x plus 7y. And the next 2 pieces, well, they begin with a negative. So we're going to factor in a minus, and these have a 5 in common, and a y as well. So a minus 5y can come out, and what's left over? The x, right? And 35, that's negative, divided by a 5 that's negative. Negative divided by negative makes it a positive. 35 divided by 5 is a 7. And we've got y squared. We're taking 1 out. So that leaves you with the 7y there. Next step, are these exactly the same? Yes, they are. So that means then that an x plus 7y can come out. Gone, gone. And what's left over? X minus 5y. That's it. And that's your final, finished, factored answer. We got one more, and then I'll pick a couple more from our textbook, and then we'll take a short break. So I'm going to do the next one, which is 14, and then I'll probably do 2 more out of the textbook. Then we'll take a short break. We'll come back, we'll do a couple more, and we'll see how to do 10, and also how to do question 20. So let's look at question 14 quickly here. And 14, we're going to have to factor something out again. So question 14 is 2x squared minus 6xy minus 8y squared. A lot of times, students forget to do the very, very first step. Before we do anything else, no matter what the problem is, it can have 2 terms, it can have 4 terms, 3 terms, 5 terms, it doesn't matter. First thing we do is we look at all the numbers and all the variables and see if something can come out. 2, 6, and an 8, right? So we know a 2 comes out. You have to take out your greatest common factor first. So a 2 is going to come out. I can't take out an x because that one doesn't have one. So the only thing that can come out is a 2. So that leaves you then with an x squared, a minus 3xy, and a minus 4y squared. No number, so we put the 1 here, and now we multiply again. 1 times a negative 4, well, that is a negative 4. It's negative. So that means that one number is positive, one number is negative. Which one's going to be the larger number, the positive number or the negative number? Watch your sign in the middle. Okay, look over here. What's a sign in my middle piece here? Negative. So that means a larger number is negative, smaller number is what? Positive. Always check in the middle. The middle gets you this order. Now, when I look at this, you should be able to see, okay, this is 4 and that's 3. These have a difference of only 1. So what are my 2 numbers? 4 and 1, right? So we want that minus 4. We want that positive 1. You can check because minus 4 times 1 is minus 4. And minus 4 plus 1 is a minus 3, which matches over here. You can always check that. Now we can just simply split up this middle, factor it by grouping, and then we're done. So split this middle up into x squared, using our numbers here, a minus 4xy. And you can put the 1 there if you want. You don't need to. I'm not going to, but you could put the 1xy. I'm just going to put an xy, and then a minus 4y squared. Don't worry about the 2. You don't have to write it again. All that 2 is going to do is just fall down to the end. Okay, so just kind of keep track of it. You don't have to constantly write it because then you'll make a mistake with it. All it does is fall down to the end. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Well, it looks like first 2 pieces. Looks like we can take out an x, and that's going to leave you with an x minus 4y. Second 2 pieces, well, those have a y in common. And that leaves you with an x minus 4y. if we did it correctly, these should match up. Do these match? Yep. If they don't match, you made a mistake. No doubt about it. If these do not match, you made a mistake. These match, and so we've got an x minus 4, y, gone, gone. And what's left over? X plus y. And do not forget what's out in front of all of it at the very, very end. You bring down that 2. Okay. So first thing we do, look to see if there's a number in common, and there may or may not be one. If there is, you have to factor it out. Factor it out in any variables that are in common. Now let's do 2 more of these from our textbook. Then we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll do some more of them. And then move on to 5-3. Okay, so let's look now at 5-2. I'm going to pick a couple more from our textbook here that we're going to try to factor. How about, and I'm on page 355. How about we look at number 50? This is going to kind of be an extension of what we just did. We've got a 9k cubed minus 36 k squared and a plus 189 k. Now, when I look at this, how do I figure out what number can come out? Well, first off, I look at my smallest number. Okay? And my smallest number in this case is a 9. Now, it might be that 9 is going to be divisible by all the others. Let's check. Okay? 9. 36, does it divide evenly by 9? Yes, it does, right? That's your 4. 189, does that evenly divide by 9? Yes, it does. That's 21. So we know a 9 is going to come out. Now, what else do we know? It begins with a negative, so you have to factor out a negative to go along with that 9. And they also have a variable in common. And what variable do they have in common? They have a k. So that was my first step, was to check to see if we had a greatest common factor. And we did. Now, whenever you factor out a negative, that's going to switch your signs. So negative and negative makes it a positive. K cubed, take out a k. That leaves you with a k squared. 36 divided by 9. Okay, negative and negative makes that positive. And 36 divided by 9 is a 4. We took a k out, so that leaves you with the 4k. Last one, 189. It's positive divided by a negative 9. Okay, positive divided by negative should make it a negative, and that's going to be a minus 21. We're going to proceed to factor. So we put the 1 here. We multiply. 1 times a negative 21. That's a minus 21. Okay, so this is negative. So what do we know? 1 positive. 1 is negative. And then we come over and we look in the middle. And what's our sign in our middle? Positive, so we know this is positive, and that one's got to be negative. Not very many factors of 21. The only thing that we have in 21 is a 3 and a 7. So let's try a 3. Okay, 21 divided by 3. What's that? Of course, 7. And what's 7 minus 3? 4. That's what we want. So what are my two numbers? Positive 4, negative 3. And you can check, because 7 times negative 3 is negative 21, matches. And 7 minus 3, well, that's positive 4, and that matches with the middle. All these are is just kind of a puzzle. It's just a game. We take that 4k and we split it up. So we've got a k squared. We've got a 7k. We've got a minus 3k. And we've got a minus 21 that comes down. The ends always stay the same. They never change. The only part we work with is the middle, and we split it up. That's why it's called splitting the middle. Factor. Okay, pretty simple here. K comes out. K plus 7 is left over. Next 2 begins with a negative. So what do we have to factor out? Minus 3 and 21. They have a 3 in common. So that leaves you then with a k plus 7. These again are the same. So k plus 7. Gone, gone. What's left over? K minus 3. And do not forget what's out in front of all of it. Minus 9k. So that's your final, finished, factored, complete answer. Okay, let's try one more of these. Let's look at one where we've got to factor out some larger variables. How about question 60? Let's see what we can factor out on question 60. This one we're going to have to factor out quite a bit. At the very beginning. So question 60. We've got a 2y to the 6th. Right? We've got a plus 7xy cubed. And we've got a 6x squared. All right, well, let's see. And maybe we can't factor anything out. Okay, I don't actually think we can factor anything out. Why can we not factor anything out? I thought we could when I first looked at it, but I wasn't careful enough when I looked at it. We have a 2, a 7, and a 6. So is there any number that's in common with a 2, 7, and a 6? No. Then we look at our variables. This one has a y, this one has a y, but this one does not. Okay, this one does not have an x, so in this case, nothing is going to come out. We did that first. We checked to make sure that nothing would come out first. Sometimes things will come out, numbers, variables. Sometimes they will not. This one, nothing comes out. So what do? We take our first times our last. First times the last. 2 times 6 is 12. What do we know about the 12? It's positive. So we know they are either both positive or both negative. And what's the sign in the middle? Positive. So we know they are both positive. And 12 doesn't have a lot of options. 2 and 6 doesn't work for us. But how about 3 and 4? Yep, 3 and 4 is going to give you 7. So we need a positive 3 and a positive 4. And you can check if you want. Because 4 times 3 is 12. And 4 plus 3 is 7. Okay, so this one's actually a little bit easier. Now we do have to be very careful with the variables when we go to work this one out. When we rewrite it, the middle keeps the same variables. So 2y to the 6th. That just comes down. Now what about the 7? Okay, we're going to break the 7 up into the 4 and the 3. But what do they have with them? xy cubed. So we have 4xy cubed, and we've got a 3xy cubed. and then we have a 6x squared. The ends always stay the same. Now we factor. And when we factor, when we look at our variables, what do we take out? We always take out the smallest power that they have in common. So we've got a 2 and a 4, so I'm going to take out a 2, and we've got a y to the 6th here, and a y cubed here, so we're going to take out a y cubed. So we're going to take out a 2y cubed. When I take out that 2y cubed, that leaves you with, 2's are gone, y to the 6th, take out 3, power subtract, so that leaves you with a y cubed. 4 divided by 2 is a 2. Nothing cancels with that x, so that x stays there. So inside my parentheses should be a y cubed plus 2x. We'll take a break after this question. Let's do the next two pieces. Okay. Looks like we need to take out a 3 and an x. So 3x comes out. That leaves you with the y cubed. Now we know we're doing it correctly. Why? Because see, they're already matching up. Those had better match up. If they do not match up, you made a mistake. Can't emphasize that enough. 6 divided by 3 is a 2, so numbers match. And x squared, we took out an x, so that leaves you with a 2x. Z's are the same. So that means y cubed plus 2x comes out. Gone, gone. What's left over? 2y cubed plus 3x. Nothing's out in front, so that's going to be your final, finished, factored answer. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and take a short break. And so let's meet back here at, let's say, 9:45. So meet back here at 9:45. We'll do a couple more of these, and then